people leave Christianity all the time. It happens, and this is called apostasy. So this chapter is a warning against that. So I got asked the Bible question about Hebrews 10 to explain the law and the sacrifice and the offering, as well as what does it mean by saying there remaineth no more a sacrifice for sins. I love a good Bible question. The law essentially represents the old covenant system that God made with Moses, and it's basically saying that those sacrifices that were being made year after year by the priest with animals and the shedding of the blood, it was never enough to make one actually free from sin. Compared to the sacrifice that Jesus did on the cross, Jesus himself is the only perfect sacrifice because he was sinless, he was blameless, and so his sacrifice cleansed us from sin once and for all, compared to the fact that the priest had to do this sacrifice over and over and over again. Verse 4 says, "For it is impossible for the blood of bulls and goats to take away sins." So the part that she also found confusing was Hebrews 10:26 that says, "If we sin willfully after we have received a knowledge of the truth, there remains no more a sacrifice for the sin." Now, you have to know that this isn't talking about sin that you fall into weakness and you actually repent to God. It's not that kind of sin. Specifically, it uses the word willful sinning, which means a deliberate rejection, a deliberate kind of sinning, a deliberate hardening of your heart to continue to fall into sin, even after you have known about God, you've known about Jesus' sacrifice, you know the price that he paid on the cross, shedding his blood to cleanse you from sin, the goodness of God, the truth of the gospel and salvation, and yet even after all that, you decide to walk away. Is a person who goes back to living in rebellion despite having known God. It's basically as if Jesus never died for them. So there is no more sacrifice. There's nothing else that can be sacrificed above what Jesus has already done. So if you reject Jesus' sacrifice, there's nothing else left to help you, basically. So it's not saying that believers lose their salvation every time that they sin, but if someone hears the gospel and rejects it, they are choosing God's judgment over God's grace. So as much as Jesus has promised us that he will by no means reject anyone who comes to him, he will never cast anyone out. However, we as humans, we do have the choice, and by your will, people can walk away from God. And we see this in verse 28 explained further. Anyone who has ignored Moses' law is put to death. How much more greater a punishment do you think he who has rejected and trampled under their feet the Son of God and has considered his blood of the covenant to be common?